Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into a dietary dogma today that, let's be honest, pretty much all of us have just accepted without a second thought for decades. I mean, think about the last time you walked down a grocery store aisle. You're constantly bombarded with these bright, low-sodium labels plastered across everything from soup to cereal, right? And they usually have that little red heart, basically implying it's the only responsible choice if you care about your health. We've been fed this deeply ingrained narrative that salt is the ultimate villain, that it's this toxic substance causing high blood pressure, and we have to relentlessly cut it out if we want to live a long time. But what if that universal low-salt advice isn't actually the whole story?
And that brings us to a massive point of cognitive dissonance. Because while modern medicine often paints salt as an absolute dietary villain, from purely biological standpoint, it is an absolute, non-negotiable necessity for human life. We're talking about an essential nutrient that you literally cannot survive without. Actually, think about it. It's the only rock that humans intentionally eat. It's a fundamental contradiction, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. We're going to use historical data, cellular science, and some really cutting-edge medical research to find out what's really going on.
But before we get into the biology, we've got to understand the sheer historical weight of salt. Because for thousands of years, this wasn't just some casual seasoning sitting on a diner table. It literally drove economies and shaped entire civilizations. Back in ancient times, it held massive religious significance for the Egyptians, especially for preservation and mummification. In fact, it was so universally valuable, empires used it to conduct population censuses and levy heavy taxes. And when governments got greedy and overtaxed it, the backlash changed the world. A crushing salt tax, the gabelle, was a major fuel source for the outrage that sparked the French Revolution. Fast forward to the 19th century, and British policies banning Indians from collecting their own local salt became a massive catalyst for the Indian War of Independence. So yeah, this is a substance with incredible, world-altering power. Now that wild historical demand didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's actually deeply rooted in our evolutionary biology. Our innate craving for salt stems directly from how our ancestors survived. Historically, populations that lived mostly on hunted protein and milk, they generally didn't need to add any salt to their food because animal tissues naturally contain plenty of sodium. But when populations transitioned to agrarian lifestyles, surviving mainly on cultivated veggies, rice, and grains, they craved and actively used a ton more salt. Plants just don't give you enough sodium, so our bodies are powerfully, literally hardwired to seek it out when our diet lacks it. To really grasp those intense cravings, we have to zoom way in, down to the microscopic level. Why do we need it so badly? It all comes down to the sodium-potassium pump. You can think of this as a tiny, essential chemical battery embedded right in the membrane of almost every single cell in your body. It works around the clock, relentlessly pumping 3 sodium ions out of the cell while pulling 2 potassium ions in. And that precise electrical imbalance? That's exactly what allows your nerve cells to fire and your muscles to contract. This tiny little battery is literally powering the heartbeat in your chest and the thoughts firing in your brain right at this very second. It is so vital that these microscopic pumps consume a staggering 1/3 of a cell's entire daily energy supply.
But here's the thing, salt's job doesn't end at the nervous system. It's also the foundational master of your digestive tract. Without the chloride you get from salt, your body physically cannot produce enough stomach acid or hydrochloric acid. And you absolutely need that acid to break down proteins and absorb crucial nutrients like iron and B12. On top of that, sodium acts as this amazing biological co-transporter. It essentially grabs onto glucose and amino acids in your gut and physically shuttles them into your bloodstream. It regulates your gut's pH, and, this is a big one, it maintains your gut barrier function. Without enough salt, the tight junctions in your gut can actually weaken, opening the door to leaky gut syndrome, where undigested food and toxins slip right into your bloodstream and set off systemic inflammation.
Okay, so with all these absolutely critical functions, why are public health campaigns always screaming at us to avoid it? Well, we can't ignore the very real warnings. 2,300 milligrams, that's roughly a single teaspoon, and it's the standard daily recommended limit for adults in the US. The logic here is all about fluid dynamics. Excess salt in your blood pulls in extra water, which bumps up your overall blood volume. Imagine trying to force a massive surge of water through a really narrow garden hose. That's exactly what high blood volume does to your circulatory system. It forces your heart to work overtime and puts immense pressure on your delicate blood vessel walls. Over time, that constant, high-pressure state can lead to stiffened vessels, arterial damage, and high blood pressure. And there's some really fascinating recent research that validates the danger of going overboard. Scientists wanted to see what happens to the body's internal alarms when salt gets too high, so they put mice on a high-salt diet for 14 days. The result? It completely lit up their hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is basically their central stress response system. The mice on the high-salt diet showed massively amplified levels of corticosterone, a major stress hormone. And because mammalian stress pathways are so similar across species, this translates directly to us. Extreme unchecked salt intake isn't just a mechanical stress on your heart, it literally throws the entire human body into a state of chronic hormonal panic.
So if high salt causes all that mechanical stress and hormonal panic, then the absolute lowest possible salt intake should logically be the healthiest option for us, right? Well, get ready because here is the plot twist of this explainer. That blanket assumption is being heavily challenged by emerging data right now. It turns out blindly advising everyone to ruthlessly slash their salt intake can actually trigger a cascade of completely different, totally hidden health crises.
Welcome to the hidden epidemic of hyponatremia. That's the medical term for dangerously low sodium levels in your blood. And believe it or not, it's actually the single most common electrolyte abnormality seen in clinical practice today. And we aren't talking about a minor headache here. Symptoms range from nausea and severe brain fog, all the way up to extreme cognitive dysfunction, convulsions, and even coma. What's truly scary is how often it slips under the radar. An elderly patient comes into the clinic with lethargy or confusion, and everyone just waves it off as getting older or chronic fatigue, when in reality, their sodium levels have absolutely crashed. To put the scale of this into perspective, one study of hospitalized patients over 60 in Uganda found that an astonishing 25% were actively suffering from hyponatremia, 1 in 4.
This points to a massive flaw in these universal one-size-fits-all health guidelines. I mean, just compare that standard dietary recommendation of 2,300 milligrams for a whole day against the biological reality of a heavy-sweating athlete. An athlete can easily lose up to 2,000 milligrams of sodium in just a single liter of sweat. If that athlete rigidly sticks to a generic low-sodium diet just because they read it on a fitness blog, they're going to severely dilute their blood, trigger acute hyponatremia, and totally tank their physical and cognitive performance. Our sodium needs are profoundly, unapologetically individual.
And hey, this doesn't just apply to elite marathoners or hospitalized patients. Aggressively lowering your salt intake can completely wreck your day-to-day quality of life, especially in your gut. Remember those digestive duties we talked about? When you severely restrict salt, your stomach acid drops like a rock. Without that acid, your food just sits there in your stomach way too long, fermenting and causing major bloating, gas, and systemic sluggishness. It's a pretty cruel irony, honestly. A health-conscious person could eat the absolute cleanest, most perfect organic salad in the world, but if they're overly restricting their salt, their digestion just grinds to a halt, leaving them bloated and essentially malnourished.
So, if the takeaway here is that we need to stop fearing salt and make sure we're getting enough, should we just enthusiastically grab the nearest salt shaker? Not quite. The quality of the salt matters just as much as the quantity. Standard commercial table salt is incredibly heavily processed. In fact, studies show it can contain up to 600 microplastics per kilogram. You're basically introducing tiny inflammation-triggering plastic shards directly into your gut, along with synthetic anti-caking chemicals. Now compare that to natural spring salts. These are harvested from pristine, 220-million-year-old deposits sealed deep underground way before plastic even existed. Aside from being totally pure, these natural salts retain vital, naturally occurring trace minerals, like magnesium and potassium, which actually help support your digestion and smooth muscle function.
So how do we practically apply all this science? Here are 3 actionable steps to optimize your salt intake for maximum health. First, upgrade your source right away. Ditch that heavily processed table salt and switch to a microplastic-free spring or artisanal rock salt. Second, rethink how you apply it. Don't just dump a massive pile of salt on your food right before you take a bite. Hitting an empty stomach with a highly concentrated clump of salt all at once can actually shock your delicate microbiome. Instead, build it in gradually. Layer it during the cooking process so it integrates smoothly into the food. And third, if you want to get really advanced, look into modern delivery methods like liquid salt sprays. They allow for incredibly precise, gentle absorption that your gut absolutely loves.
To pull this whole explainer together, we have to look at what happens when you zoom out and analyze the massive, overarching data sets. A really comprehensive, highly authoritative meta-analysis by Groudel and colleagues perfectly nailed this biological reality. Let me just read their conclusion directly to you. Both low sodium intakes and high sodium intakes are associated with increased mortality, consistent with a U-shaped association. The science here is crystal clear, and it isn't just an opinion. The extreme ends of the spectrum, blindly restricting it too much, or recklessly consuming too much are both dangerous. The real truth about salt is fundamentally U-shaped.
The blanket dietary rules of the past are finally fading, and thankfully, they're being replaced by a much more nuanced understanding of our individual biology. Your personal sweat rate, the exact composition of your diet, your daily activity levels, the current state of your digestion, all of these things dictate exactly what you need. The truth about salt isn't some straight, rigid line. It's a delicate, deeply personal U-shaped curve. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder today. Are you rigidly following an outdated one-size-fits-all guideline, or are you actually listening to your body's individual need for salt? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep learning.